the Room One Popular Opinions. It is that time of year again. It is time to unveil our best, worst, crappiest, finest, just everything of 2023. Now, since I haven't uploaded in a while and I haven't in general ever really stuck to this sort of format, we're going to do this like last year, where I'm just going to run through all the bad, all the good, all the mediocre, but in no particular order and no rating and no like top 10 or something. If I have more than 10 or less than 10, we're going to do that many. So let's just get into it as quickly as possible because I am going to be rambly about several of these. You can already expect it. Now, one disclaimer is that I'm not done reading for the year. I still have one book to finish, and maybe I'll read like a short one before the end of the year. So if you are interested in whether anything else made my top of the year or whatever, you can always go on my Goodreads and check because I'm very good at updating on there. So let's just get into the video. As always, we are going to start with the worst books of the year because it's just way more fun to end on a good note. And this bit is usually the rambly bit, so we're definitely going to keep rambling first and then slide into the good stuff. Let's start with the beginning of the year. Now, I will be mentioning DNFs, but not as detailed as books that I finished, except for one book, and you will see. First, the thing we are going to talk about is Age of Myth and Age of Swords, which is the book that I actually DNF'd. The worst thing about Age of Myth, and now it's been a while since I talked about it, so I feel like for all of these bad books, they get worse the more that I think about them. So this book in particular, I had high hopes for it because there was like a wolf, there's a girl who lives in the woods. I thought it would be like very aesthetic nature core fantasy. It was not. It was not. It was just someone's power trip over middle-aged society. Like, that is it. This guy just wanted to shove all he learned about industrialization and people learning how to craft things, and the fantasy was secondary to that. Like, the world building is non-existent, or if it is existent, it is bad. Just straight up bad. The second book got pretty awful, and I would have DNF'd it even if I had not read the animal cruelty warning on Goodreads, which was just the top of the cake. So I would not recommend this book to anyone. Several of these books I would not recommend to anyone because at my core I am a hater, and if a book is bad, I do think it's not recommendable. I'm not one of those people who will tell you to read it anyway, even though I didn't like it, because some books are just straight up bad. So I would not recommend this to anyone. Perhaps if you don't like fantasy that much, you might enjoy it. If you like politics and very convoluted relationships between races, but you don't really like fantasy, I feel like this could be for you, potentially, but I still wouldn't recommend it because this is self-published and you can tell it's self-published. Like, the author's favorite book was the worst one of the two that I read. So we will be moving on from this. The next thing, unfortunately, that I have to talk about is Steinbeck. I was, again, in my Steinbeck phase near the beginning of the year. I did not know whether to pick Grapes of Wrath or Of Mice and Men. But in order to be fair, we're going to talk about Mice and Men because that is the book that I actually finished. All of these books are kind of the author's early work, like both Grapes of Wrath and Mice and Men were written before East of Eden. I think East of Eden was like his magnum opus. It was his last popular book or something. I'm not an expert. But Mice and Men, where do I even begin with Mice and Men? I guess the only thing that I have to say about this book is that it was pointless. Like, it was short, so it wasn't that difficult to read, but it was just pointless. It feels, and I said that before, like the diary of someone very miserable, and I have no desire to read anything like that. Now this, I can't say if it's objectively poorly written or not, although I didn't really enjoy the writing style. I just think it was pointless and miserable to read. That is the worst thing that I can say about this book because it was just miserable to read and I did not see any value in me reading this. The next book, which will be a pleasure for many, is The Secret History. I, as I said in my review, do not like the dark academia genre. I do not subscribe to the idea that it is dark academia to be pretentious. I don't know when, like, darker themes in school became horrible, horrible, pretentious people you will never, ever be able to root for. Like, obviously, there's more stuff than the secret history in the genre, but I know all the plots of all the main books. Because after this, I did my research. I like went through all the popular books and I watched someone talk about them in detail so I can know what I'm missing and if they are as bad as the secret history. And all of them seem to have this common trend of it just being about horrible, horrible, irredeemable, garbage, trash can, like, just horrible people. Not like going past unlikable, just straight up pathetic, weak, obsessive, like lame people. And as someone who likes the dark academia genre of like criticizing academia and the bad things about it, I'm a big fan of those things as someone who generally hates academia and having the themes of like, I don't know, bullying, existentialism, philosophy thrown in there, and like pressure and conforming to society's norms and that kind of stuff in academia. That in my head is dark academia, not just garbage rich people and their bullshit. Because everything that happens in this book was nonsense. It was nonsense and they did it to themselves. I do not want to even discuss this book anymore. Like, just remembering it now, I am already irritated because this book was a chore to finish, not to mention that it's easily 200 pages too long. After the murder, there's nothing of substance in that book. And before, again, someone comes on here and says that I wanted to hate it, absolutely not. As I said, I like the idea of this genre of literature and of this aesthetic and of this vibe and this discussion. I like the idea of it, but I do not like in the slightest the focus of what most of the books in the genre are focused on, basically. I do not enjoy that in the slightest, and if ever this genre pivots in the direction of something I'm interested in, I will give it another try because I love the aesthetic, but this was just not it. This was not it. I would absolutely tell Donna Tartt to stop writing about pretentious people, although I have seen that apparently she is very much like this in real life. Like, she went to a similar college, she lived in a similar place, and I at least saw some controversy somewhere online. Don't quote me on it because I do not care enough to remember, but some controversy about her actually being pretty pretentious, like the people in the book. And if it is true, all I have to say is you can tell. You can tell she loved writing 600 pages about these people, and if she could have done 1,000, she would have done 1,000, because I feel like if she isn't this bad in real life, she definitely gravitates towards it, because you cannot write such boring, lame, pathetic people if you don't at least somewhat gravitate towards them, if that makes any sense. I promise I will be less rambly about the rest of them. The next one is Light Perpetual. I don't have much to say about this that I haven't already said in like my mid-year freakout or whatever it was tag, but Sapkowski genuinely has last book problems, because he is an author that doesn't like to finish anything, that doesn't like to give you any satisfying resolution to anything. He is an author who can write a 17 long saga about very likable characters just having dinner. He is that type of author. I'm rereading The Witcher currently. Perfection. When they do nothing of importance, that is when he is at his best. But when it comes to resolutions and payoff and themes and just overall anything to do with endings, this man just quits. Like, gives up. I've said before, and that's probably my favorite reference to this book that I've come up with this year, but this book is full of crap, literally and figuratively. That's my favorite thing I can say about this book. I am upset that I finished it, actually. But on the plus side, he has that kind of writing style where even though this book was crap and the second book was not the greatest too, I can very happily say that I will reread the first book again. And if I'm not mistaken, I put the first book actually on my favorite books of the year. So I'm not going to dwell on this too much. Next one, which saddens me, but is probably the most unique on this list, is Villette. All of these other books are worse the more I think about them and the more time passes. But this book, I have very mixed opinions on this. I gave it 2 stars, and I think objectively it deserves 2 stars because for what it was trying to do, it failed. And I absolutely stand by my review of it. And it deserves 2 stars. However, since it's Charlotte Bronte, who is one of my favorite authors of all time, even her worst isn't bad. So while I would give it 2 stars objectively and subjectively because I dislike her melancholic ending, I would still consider rereading this because, like I said before, she has an addicting quality to her writing, and she can write characters like no other, and she can write introspection that's interesting even if the characters aren't the greatest. And I stand by that. So this is probably the only book on this list that I would consider rereading ever, even though I think it deserves the 2 stars. So make of that what you will, but this is probably the most positive negative review I will give this year. I look like a Victorian orphan with these sleeves, but I love them so much. We're almost there. This one is going to be a quick one. Sanatorium. This was just garbage. This was just objectively garbage. Like writing-wise, plot-wise, this was just garbage. This was like she sat down, saw a template for writing thrillers, and just went with it. Every cliche in the book. The only way you would ever be able to enjoy this is if you never read a book. Not necessarily, I'm being dramatic, but if you've never read a thriller, ever watched a thriller, if this is your first thriller ever, first of all, I think that would not be very fun even then, but only in that specific scenario can I imagine you enjoying this. Otherwise, it was just amateur garbage. The fact that I finished this was actually astonishing, but yeah, not good. Just not, objectively not good. Now, the next one, I will actually put down the cup for this one because time to dig into this. Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. This book. Now, for context, I read 400 pages of Pillars of the Earth. No idea how I even made it that far, but let's break it down bit by bit because this is actually the book that I've wanted to rant about. Like in this entire video, this is the book that I've wanted to rant about for a while, so just strap in. There are authors who write bleak, misogynistic scenarios sympathetically. Let's take Sapkowski again as a comparison. The Witcher, and especially the other series, like the historical series that isn't actually in an imaginary world, bleak, misogynistic. But Sapkowski is very much a feminist, and he's genuinely funny, and that way, all the gross and terrible and dark stuff is actually palatable. Ken, on the other hand, I have personal issues with because if that man isn't a raging misogynist, he's very, very good at pretending that he is. Which we go back to my rant on The Secret History, where I feel like there is no way that an author does something this vile and doesn't gravitate towards it, at least a little bit. Like, at least, I'm not saying Ken is a rapist, because I'm pretty sure that would have been discovered by now. But he writes it still a little bit too well. Like, there's not a hint of sympathy in sight. I'm not going to go into actual spoilers, but just, like, themes, I guess. Not a single woman in this book is written that is not sexualized, sexually assaulted, is a birthing machine, or just overall does not have any personality besides being lecherous. He does attempt to give them some personality by them being defiant, but usually that is stopped by them being either beaten or raped or just sent away. So, again, if he isn't a misogynist, he's very good at pretending that he is. The male character is irredeemable, stupid, boring, greedy. Like, you can tell me that was the point of the book. But this is 1,100 pages. This is 1,100 pages. And you're telling me that in 400 pages, I could not find a single character whose thread I wanted to follow? Not a single one. Okay, yeah. I'm sure that was what he intended. Like, not a single one. I thought I would be able to follow, like, the corrupt priest storyline. But he had such a hard-on for architecture in that bit that it was just a no from me. So there's not a single good thing I can say about this book. All bad, horrendous. And I knew about the rape, sexual assault, yes. It's not like I'm monetized, so it doesn't matter that I say it. The sexual assault. I knew about it, so I wanted to like push through and get to that scene because I had a hunch, but I still wanted to be sure before I ranted about it that he wrote it poorly. And when I tell you that scene, I felt nauseous. I felt physically ill because it's written from the perspective of the assaulter. Is that the word? I felt ill. And not in a sympathetic way. I just felt ill. And I knew that there was going to be more of this because in reviews they said that this character does nothing except that. So I just I had no words. I feel like there is no scenario at all where it needs to be this detailed, where we could have gotten the picture if he had just told us what happened. There is no scenario in which this needed to be described except being edgy and realistic. So I have nothing good to say about this book. I am just fuming just thinking about it. Like, after that scene, I read the entire plot summary for anyone who's wondering why you didn't finish it. I read the entire plot summary. I know how everyone ends up. I put that book on the deepest part of my shelf, turned it around so I never have to look at it. And I've never said this before, I am considering not even selling it because I do not want to be responsible for someone reading this because of me. I do not want to make money off of this heap of steaming garbage. And I might just keep it there until my mind has been cleansed from the memory of this experience. So this will probably be the most negative rant. This is the worst book I read this year. Maybe not the worst book I've read ever, but it's worse than Bridgerton. It's worse than Bridgerton, and I will give you that, but and also Ken Follett as a person, I would not want to come across. I would not. If you can spend it, and this is a series, if you can write about this so hideously for 1,000 pages, I would not want to talk to that man in person. So I do not want to inflict this upon the world. If you've ever taken any advice from me, do not touch this book like with a 10-foot pole. After that delight, let's just get into the best books of this year. Now, I will not mostly be mentioning the rereads. I will just say them now. I reread Lord of the Rings for the second time ever, sadly, and that's just a book that I can't put down. Like, I remember putting it down for like half a year because I don't read in the summer, and I read Return of the King in one night because you can't not read Return of the King in one night. So that was that. Yeah, let's just go into the new ones. Howl's Moving Castle. I think that's the first like new book that I read this year and actually liked. I have nothing to say about this, but good things. Like, it's delightful. It's not much like the movie, but it's delightful. It's just delightful to read. So I have nothing to say. You all know about this book. If you like the Ghibli movie, you're probably going to like the book, even though they're not much alike, but it's all vibes, no plot. I mean, there is a plot, but that's not why you're going to read this book. The next book, and this is new, so I'm kind of tying it in with what I said before, The Witcher 8, or Season of Storms. I read this for the first time this year because I had avoided that last time because I thought it would be like chronologically 8th, and then I didn't want to read anything after book 5, so I read it for the first time this year. Loved it. Adored it. Like, he wrote it 13 years after The Last Witcher, and he's back. Like, the tone is exactly like the tone and writing and setting and pace like the first few Witcher books, which are by far the best. So this was fantastic. And this chronologically, I think, I'm not sure if it's like supposed to be third chronologically or first. There's debates about that. I think first, actually, like before Ciri, before Yennefer, before all of that. So technically you could read that first, but I love it. I love it so much. And I realize I've been talking for a while, so now I'm a little bit winded. The following book we're going to be talking about is also Sapkowski, which is Tower of Fools. This is the only book of that trilogy that will ever make it to my favorites list. It's just fantastic. It's like The Witcher. It's fun, funny, whimsical, so nonsensical that it's just enjoyable. And you can tell he enjoyed writing this. Like, this is one book that I will reread happily without ever picking up the sequels. Like, he is lewd. He swears a lot. He has crass humor, but it is so Slavic that I absolutely adore it. Like, it is so specifically Slavic, the humor that he does, that I can't but not enjoy it. And it has the fantasy in there, so it's just fun. It's literally sort of like Howl. All vibes, no plot. So, let's just keep going because I am getting tired of talking. Pillars of the Earth took a lot out of me. I'm going to do my utmost to be organized and to like keep the manga separate. And just FYI, manga will never be on my worst of the year because I very selectively read. So the next book was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Now this I would consider to be like, I wouldn't say my Bible, that's stupid to say. It's not like I'm taking instructions from this. But it sounds like something I would have written like 2,000 years ago. Everything that this man put down in his diary, because this was essentially like literally his meditations, like his thoughts, his musings while he was emperor. Something I would have written 2,000 years ago and something that I would write today. So this is like all of my thoughts 2,000 years ago in the form of a Roman emperor. But it's not really a book, so I can't talk about it properly. Then I have some manga. Now, this is a reread that I do have to mention because it's been a long time since I read it. Revenge of the Sith. There's a vlog that I've probably seen like 3 times just because I like reliving some of the moments while I read it, because there's a couple scenes where I genuinely like read out the book. That also took a lot out of me. Like, I needed a break when I read this because it was a lot, but it just makes the movie so much better that I don't think I can ever watch it the same way. And because of all like the lore and the knowledge and like the context that I have, I don't think I can ever properly discuss Revenge of the Sith with someone who hasn't read it, because I feel like we will not have the same impressions of the story. And then next we have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Now this is like a low favorite. Like, I wouldn't say this is something I'm obsessed with, but the vibes of this were immaculate. Like, this is dark cottagecore. This is everything you could want in a book. Like, it's creepy and ominous and the tension is there, but it's also like mushrooms and the garden and a black cat sleeping in the lettuce patch and a tree and nailing books to said tree, and it's just good. It's just really, really good. So we have Always Lived in the Castle. Highly recommend if you've not read it before, and I should be reading Hill House pretty soon. Then we've got some last minute books, and then I will go back to probably my favorite book of the year that isn't a manga. We have Girl Who Drank the Moon. That's the children's book that I read this year. Absolutely adored it. Like, it also has witchy vibes, but obviously for children, so it's better written. But there's a cave in the woods, a tiny dragon, an eldritch creature, an old witch raising a little magical girl who likes to drink moonlight. What could you not like about that? Then we've got Temeraire, which is His Majesty's Dragon is the official, I think, title. But yeah, the first book in this series. I bought the entire series after this. I do not like Naomi Novik, as you well know. I did not like 2 of her other books that I read. I loved Temeraire. It's very much a ripoff of Cressida Cowell. But apart from like the entire setup of the Dragon Society, it's not a ripoff. So, which is why I think she can kind of get away with it. But she did kind of plagiarize it. Let's not lie to each other. Like, the entire idea is pretty much the same, but the setting is different. So if you like any kind of dragon writing or dragon stories or companionship between humans and dragons, this is the series for you. Like, I love the first book. I'm probably going to love the rest of the books because this is just a template that works well for a reason, and it is very much for me. I can read anything with this template. So yeah. And then the actual favorite book of the year is obviously East of Eden. I love how for a lot of these, like, my favorite and least favorite books of the year, they're the same authors, which is hilarious to me, how they can have that much range that I can both hate and love them at the same time. This is definitely the best book that I read this year. If we do not consider the manga, this was excellent. Like, I started that in 2022, but I finished it in January of this year, and it was beautiful, just beautiful. It's kind of similar to Meditations in the sense that it just discusses things and talks about things and comes to conclusions that I would also come to. Like, I just love the theme of this and what it was exploring and what it was trying to say. It just spoke to me personally. So I wouldn't know how to recommend this, because I feel like if you don't have this belief, worldview, this exact thought process, I'm not sure how you would enjoy it, but I still would highly recommend you try it out. And if you ever wanted to try out Steinbeck, I think this is the way to go. I read 3 of his most popular books, and this is the only one that made the cut. So that is it for the best books of the year and worst books of the year. Let's get into the manga. I think I only have 3. I'm like looking down at my list. No, 4. 4, but one of them is like technically new. So let's start with the obvious one. I read Fate Zero this year. Now, this is technically a book, but I'm counting it with manga because, like, it's in an anime universe. That's the context you're going to read it in, or a game universe. In any case, it's not like the book universe where you're going to pick this up. This inflamed my obsession with Fate even further. Like, I've been obsessed with Fate, I think, like, May to November this year. If you would have asked me what my mind was constantly on, it would have been this. I read it when I was down at the seaside, and it was just not good. Like, I was walking and reading this in the street. Like, luckily, islands are not really populated that much, but if I had read this while walking in any other city, it would not have been good. So if you're at all interested in Fate, or if you have enjoyed the Fate anime or games, this is, I feel like, a must read. Like, it adds so much to the experience of that anime in particular. No words for it. I love it. I love it so much. I read it twice this year. Like, for context, I read it again after I, like, made the EPUBs. I read it again so I can annotate it, and I read it twice this year. So yes, this is kind of the obvious one. And the next 2 are kind of hand in hand, I guess. Uramichi, the 4th volume came out, the omnibus, which is, I think, volumes 7 and 8. When I found out that this had come out, because I thought, like, the author was on hiatus, which she wasn't, because they just weren't uploading it online. When I found out this came out, I read it like twice. I read it online. I read it as soon as it got here in the mail. I am this close to reading it again, because this series can make me laugh unlike anything else. If I'm ever in a foul mood, I will either read or watch this. Like, it is my number 1, like, ultimate comfort series, except for Natsume's Book of Friends. That is probably the only thing that trumped it this year. I didn't think I would find anything better than Uramichi, but Natsume's Book of Friends. I watched it also twice this year, and I read it once. Like, I'm slowly collecting the manga, but I'm reading it as it comes out. I watched it twice. It has like 6 seasons, a film, a couple like OVAs. I watched it twice. I downloaded the entire thing. I have no words to describe how much I love this series. It is the perfect blend. That's why I prefer it to Uramichi. It is a perfect blend of endearing, cute, funny, like, you know, cozy, and actually sometimes heart-wrenching and, You can genuinely tear up after having laughed for like 5 minutes. This is the series. Like, the author said she could do this all her life, and I will read this all her life. I will read it as much as she wants to publish it, because it's that good. Like, it is just that good, because she never runs out of material. Like, for context, for anyone who doesn't know, somehow, even though this is apparently one of Japan's most popular, like, IPs, people in Japan really love it. It's because it's about yokai, which is why I think they like it that much. It's basically like Japanese spirits and Japanese history and beliefs, and not really religion, but you know what I mean, like spirits in Japan, how they have like spirits for everything, like for the river, for the stone, for the seasons, for everything. And it has my favorite dynamic of all time, similar to Temerary's, where it's eldritch being and teenager form like a family bond. And my heart, whenever these two are together, is off the charts, just gone. I love them more than words can express. And I will read this as long as she will write it. I will watch as long as they will make it. They're apparently making season 7, which I can't wait, because one of my favorite arcs from the manga is hopefully going to be animated in season 7. But this is just a good time. I almost didn't watch it because the first episode, it's a very long anime in terms of how long ago it was made. Like, the first season was made in 2008. I almost didn't watch it because the first episode was creepy. Like, I was in my cozy anime mood, like stuff that I watch before bed. And I played this and I was like, this is actually kind of creepy. There's ghosts. Like, I'm not interested in this. But then I tried it out the next day and I was like in love with it. Genuinely. I watched it twice this year. And I have all the love in the world for it. I know why people in Japan love it. And I'm not in Japan, but I am one of them. To wrap up the video, we're just going to talk about my favorite thing of all time, which is Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind by Hayao Miyazaki. Now, that's kind of it. That is actually kind of it. This is on the level of like Meditations and East of Eden, but about 10 levels above it in terms of content. I thought I loved his writing, but I always thought it was like held back in a way. I feel like he, in his films, was containing his beliefs in a way. That's why Mononoke is probably my favorite Ghibli, because I feel like he comes closest to what he wanted to say with this. And I loved every word of it. Every page, every word, every drawing, I can't believe he made this. And then in the afterword it says, I discovered I wasn't good at making comics, so this will probably be the only one I ever make. Because, sir, like, what do you mean? You created the best work of all time, but you don't think you can make comics? Like, sir. Right after he finished this, he made Mononoke. Like, I mean, she was in development right as he was finishing Nausicaa, but he made Mononoke right after this, which is why I feel like Mononoke was basically like a toned down version of Nausicaa. I have nothing but the deepest of love and respect for this. This almost transcends fiction, because I feel like I was just talking to him like soul to soul, and it was just transcendental. Like, I felt like I was genuinely speaking honestly to an old man in Japan, and we agreed perfectly about this thing that was very near and dear to us. So I have nothing more to say about this. I'm not even going to get into the plot, but I also was surprised in the plot sometimes, because he does that thing where you think, oh, there's no way this character is this stupid, or they would do this. It seems very dangerous and not safe. And then the character says, this is definitely not safe, but I have a way of getting out of it. And like, his love of nature and animals and the world, and this is as close as you'll ever get to be like gushing, because I feel like I can crap talk more than I can gush. I don't really have the vocabulary for the things that I love on this level. but this is as close as you'll ever get to me gushing that much. This is like the antithesis to Pillars of the Earth. Like this, I would force everyone to read, unlike the other thing. So, perfection. That's kind of it. That is it for the video. That is it for the year. It was somewhat rough, but to be fair, this is my last like semester of university. So I've been crap at reading, crap at posting. I've been playing an insane amount. Like I've been putting an insane amount of hours into The Sims, which is so embarrassing because I hate that game so much. The whole thing is just a little embarrassing and I don't even want to get into it, but this is my last like semester of undergrad, so I had work. I still have work that I'm shirking, but yeah, I'm going. If I do read something like in the next 3 days, you will see it on Goodreads. You will see it on Goodreads, but I'm at around like between 140 and 150 books. And if I do manage to finish Lord of Chaos, then my reading will be at like 40-ish thousand pages. So that's very great, I guess, but I didn't read all that I wanted to read. I didn't finish all I wanted to finish, but it doesn't really matter. Like, reading it on the 28th of December or on the 8th of January is literally the same thing. So, none of that matters. If you read 2 books because you were busy, literally none of that matters. Who is going to police you? I do not know. The only reason that a lot of us read like 150 to 200 books is because we read graphic novels and manga. Let's be realistic here. Like, no one is reading 200 actual 500-page books because that's literally impossible. I feel like even if that was your job, you wouldn't really be able to do that. So how did your reading year go? Did the one book you read actually impress you? Was it decent? What's the crap that you read? What's the good stuff that you read? I really do want to know because I feel like, and this is just going to be a bit of a tangent and then I will leave you, but I feel like recently people have been really shit at expressing their opinions. Like, this is the time of year when it's time to like actually talk honestly. Every worst books of the year video that I've seen was like, this book wasn't for me. This book was very well written, but not my vibe. Like, this is something that everyone should read, but I didn't like woman, because I mostly watch women. Please, for the love of everything, give your honest opinion. Like, you don't have to say that maybe you will like this book if you thought it was garbage. Like, just say it was garbage and that you wouldn't recommend it. Like, there's no one who's going to punish you for saying that a book was garbage. And there's also no one who is going to reward you for saying this was the best piece of literature ever written, even though you hated it. If you do that, I will hate you. Because if I pick up a book based on your recommendation and it's garbage, I will be blaming you because you did not give your honest opinion. So if anyone thinks I was too harsh on Pillars of the Earth, good. Good, because maybe for once you will actually see someone who does not want you to read a book. I don't think it's for anyone. Do not read it. So, yeah, please be more open with your opinions. What are books that you hated this year? I do not want to hear that you didn't hate anything because that is impossible. You cannot like everything that you read. So what are the books that you hated this year? I want to know because it is time to finally bring back free speech on the internet because it's irritating to watch, frankly. Rant over. I will see you in the next video, probably in the new year. Happy New Year if that's so, but I might make like a film and TV series wrap up too, but we'll see. I will see you in the next video whenever that is.